Okay, so
So,
just in case, right? We have not upgraded to a premium plan for our Google Meet, so there might be an interruption or something like that. Like, let's say the meeting cuts off, so we might send you a link again to the website that we chatted on, and you
Okay.
can come back in. Yeah. Okay, so this is real, and today we have Noah Healy with us. Hello.
yeah.
Yeah.
Hello.
So, Mr. Noah, would you kindly introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. So, greetings all. My name's Noah Healy. I'm a recreational mathematician. I was born and raised in Charlottesville, Virginia, and I'm working on a upgrade to commodity market design, the first upgrade in the last 8 centuries.
That's amazing. So, where did you study long way before all of this
Uh,
happened?
well, as I said, born and raised, I've been in Charlottesville my entire life. I've visited some other places, even different continents, but I keep coming back, and as it happens, the University of Virginia is located right here in town, and I started there while I was still in high school, and so just kept going to college there.
I see. So, I've done a bit of research about you through your profile, and it says here that you have founded Core Disk, developed CDM method. Am I right?
Yes.
Yes. And so you find that it's your responsibility to produce an algorithmic technology product. Am I right to say?
Well, yeah, that's a somewhat grandiose way of putting it, which is sort of how people talk on profiles. But algorithms I find fascinating and enjoyable. So this is my vocation and avocation. And CDM solves a major problem that pretty much everyone on Earth is presently having, and the problem is unfortunately so sort of fundamental that many people, while they recognize the symptoms, don't really recognize the problem. The issue is that we're essentially running the entire world's economy off of a single algorithm, the double-sided open call marketplace. So if you've ever seen, yeah, sure. You're a bit quiet there
Yeah.
in my.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
So if you've ever seen television or movies, or if you're personally familiar with markets, those rooms with a bunch of guys shouting at each other, trying to trade some, stock issue or oil or something like that. There are numerous systems that still work exactly like that, and the ones that don't work exactly like that use computers for some or all of that behavior. So the computers are shouting at each other instead of people shouting at each other. And that system basically says, well, what if we bring all the buyers and sellers together in one room and have them carry out all their transactions in public where everybody can see them doing things, so that when you're not trading, you can be seeing what other people are trading and get an idea of what sort of prices people are offering and what sort of prices people are taking.
Mhm.
Well, that's perfectly sensible, and it works quite well. The issue is that it leaves out speed as a consideration, and information processing as a consideration. And when humans had no option but to use humans and our brains to do fast and information processing things, that was fine. Unfortunately, we have these machines that the three of us are talking on right now, and they can perceive and process information radically faster than people can. And if an entity is in that system that can act faster than the system itself can, that entity can provide noisy information to the system. So that could be falsehood, that could be error, that could be just intentional BS. That's that could happen. And the more noise there is in the system, the less valuable your ability to see what's going on is to you. And there's a paradox essentially. The cost of the marketplace goes up the less valuable it is.
Yeah. No.
Which means that sort of natural evolutionary process of people having access to computer technology behaving in ways that reward them causes the market to become less useful and more expensive, which is exactly what we've been seeing for longer than the two of you have been alive. Actually, it's pretty much longer than I've been alive, and I'm definitely older than the two of you. So,
No.
yeah, that's what we're facing. These markets are breaking down, not so much in slow motion, in sort of unpredictable motion. They probably aren't totally gone yet. Maybe they are. It's very hard for us to tell because we don't have a external secondary system telling us what's going on. So, when you only have one source of information, how well it's functioning isn't something you can gauge. But that problem is leading to economic destabilization and dislocation, which is causing a lot of political turmoil, and it's intrinsic to the algorithm. I have found a way to effectively flip the fundamental interest of the marketplace on its head, to a marketplace that increases its payout for stabilizing rather than destabilizing. And so computers can be added to my marketplace and they will be punished for noise generation. And so the drivers will be towards stabilization and creation of a functioning system.
I see. Wait, so when you mean stabilizing the market, right? So do you mean as in like, let's say computers are actually generating content, right? So you're trying to clean them out, like direct them to a certain place, or like what do you mean by that?
Yeah. So the value of marketplaces is price information. So if you have a business and it's influenced by global conditions, which unless unless you're one of those Andaman Islanders or somebody that lives way up the Amazon Creek, or there's a few uncontacted tribal pockets of humanity here and there, but for most of us, that's your condition. Then circumstances beyond your knowledge and awareness can affect your business. An example from my history: one summer I was working for a local ice cream shop, and it was the summer of the UPS strike. So this is like more than 20 years ago. UPS struck, and it was going to affect global supply chains because UPS is a major supply carrier. And the owner had sort of, it was in the news that the UPS strike was coming up. So he had sort of checked things out, worked out a supply chain, over ordered some stuff. He'd sort of anticipated that the strike probably couldn't go on for more than so long, and so the stuff that he got from UPS he sort of stacked up. Okay, fair enough. So the UPS strike happens, and the Dutch company that produces the cocoa that he uses to make chocolate ice cream contacts him and says, "We get our cocoa beans from UPS, and we didn't, put in a 3-month stockpile of cocoa beans, so we're not in the cocoa selling market, until the strike's over." And so he had to rush out and buy regular chocolate ice cream and not make his own, because you can't run an ice cream shop without chocolate. and he couldn't make chocolate ice cream anymore
Mm.
because he can't make chocolate ice cream without chocolate. Uh, so these sorts of things are a living part of even very prosaic and local businesses. And the market essentially can concentrate all of that information into price. So it doesn't matter to your restaurant why the price of chicken or rice or wheat or beef has gone up. It just matters that it did. Whether there was some sort of, civil war in all of the cow using nations, or a great plague, or just ships couldn't get into port that week. It doesn't matter. It's just the price is going up.
Mm-hmm.
And so figuring out how to get that information, make it accurate and actionable and public is the problem of marketplaces.
I see.
And the thing that makes this very, very difficult is that just on sort of regular bias, it's in personal interest not to tell the truth. So let's say the two of you are going to make a deal. One of you, is making something, you're selling it to the other one. The one that's buying it would like to buy it for what it costs to make.
Yeah.
You'd probably actually like to spend even less than that, but if you're spending less than what it costs to make, then it's not going to be there again tomorrow.
Yeah, so it's a loss.
Right, but you pay what it costs to make, and that's good. That's great for you. The other guy, you'd like to get what its value to use is. They're going to take whatever you made and use it for something. You would like all of that value. So if there's a mismatch, if the value that you're going to receive is less than the cost that it takes to make, then sustainable deals aren't going to be able to happen. But if there's either a perfect match, which is extraordinarily unlikely, or a surplus, then the two of you have something to argue about. Who's gonna get how much out of this particular tug of war. And the wider the spread is, the more you have to argue about, right?
Yeah.
So we can all kind of wrap our heads around that, but we start bringing new people into the room, and each of them has their own cost of production, their own value of consumption, and the tug of war starts getting a little crazy. There's people,
there's multiple
right?
People, yeah.
And so, as that happens, it now, just as before, let's say you were like, well, let's just do this fairly. We'll put our cards on the table. We'll split it in half. I'll tell you exactly what it costs me to make things. I'll tell you exactly how valuable it is to me to use it. We'll take a look. We'll cut that in half. We'll take half of it. That seems fair, but people can lie. So, it costs me a lot more to make things than it actually costs, because that's all free money. It's worth a lot less to me.
Yeah.
So, and if you get lots of people in the room, all of whom have an incentive to overestimate their costs and underestimate their values, this becomes a very, very complex problem. So the information that if everyone knew what it cost them to make everything, and everybody knew what it was worth to them to have everything, and everybody told everybody what those numbers actually were, then you could do this simple calculation and figure out what the 50-50 fair splits were across everything. But here in our universe, where people don't really know what those numbers are and are going to lie about them even if they did, we need to rely on much more robust systems to sort of shake out those relationships, and so that's where the market comes in. So the presumption is that people who have actually made a deal are actually interested in making that deal, and that gives you some information about the conditions that are going on. And since cost of production is going to be similar-ish for people that are in the production business, and value of consumption will be similar-ish for people in the using things business, there'll be some sorts of relationships that you can rely on from other people. That's all well and good, again, as far as it goes, but if you've ever tried to do like mental math, splitting a bill, and having a friend who's a bit of an ass just saying random numbers, you know that having noise in the environment can make it a lot more difficult to think rationally. Yeah. And if you're in that market situation and you aren't thinking rationally, then you'll make decisions that aren't good for you. And because of that tug of war situation, decisions that aren't good for you, they're good for somebody.
Yeah.
So in this environment, we basically created a world where people who can shout out random numbers can make other people behave less well, and then sort of gain opportunities to pick up some advantages here and there. And that's what we see. Modern markets are operating at extraordinary speeds and are much less stable than markets used to be 50, 60 years ago, when ubiquitous computer technology wasn't really a thing yet.
Wait, so that means like CDM, the purpose of CDM is basically to sort out all those voices, which is creating a huge mess. Am I right to say that?
Effectively, yes. So what CDM does is it says, okay, deals aren't about two sides. It's not about a buyer and a seller. It's about three factors, three different factors, and each one of them needs to be treated in its own way. So the factors are the product, the buyer, the buy, the currency, basically, and the deal. So the product is a thing. It in commodity space, it's going to be mostly a physical object, although it could be a unit of electricity or something like that. It could be financial instruments. The currency is the currency. These days, basically everybody's using some kind of fiat currency. A few people are using Bitcoin and other kinds of things like that. And there are people who say that we should be using gold or silver or something else like that. But whatever your society uses as its currency is what the currency is. And then the deal is a structure, a standard information unit of how much stuff at what quality in which location for how much currency should be traded. And so what CDM does is it effectively creates three separate market actions. There's the action of people that have whatever this stuff is, the producer, that want to sell it. There's people that have currency and desire, the consumer. And then there's this sort of negotiation forecasting market to handle deals. And so what happens is, instead of trying to create a package that will attract some person to make a deal with you personally, a joint negotiation between everyone occurs, where proposals about how the market is or will evolve are made, and the system integrates those into a common deal structure that the producers and consumers can decide if it's right or wrong for them. So if the negotiators lose their minds and set prices very high, the consumers can say, well, I don't want very much or anything. And, they don't have to come to the party. And then very few deals happen. And the forecasters that made those wrong forecasts will get very little money for producing a deal that didn't attract any users. If they set it too low, the producers can take their ball and go home. And game doesn't, no game then. But when they get it just right, then the deals will flow and the returns will come. And the fun thing about this is that through this sort of depersonalization, you remember in the old system, when it was all a personal deal, every lie you told about your own circumstance made you money. Now that it's an impersonal deal, every lie you tell loses you money. So people can provide the same information, and the integration will sort of smooth it all out and give you the right answer. But those individuals will make more money the less noise, the less falsehood that they provide to the system. And so the incentive reverses. Instead of saying exactly how much you think you might be able to get away with, further over that line, describing your exact circumstances is what actually makes you the highest returns that you can have.
I see. Oh, this is a lot to take in.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, wait, so you've done, okay, so I've seen here that you've been dabbling in AI as well.
Yes, I've actually just launched a podcast. I'm on my other browser, and so that the fourth age down there, that's in the corner. That's the podcast. This is the podcast Gmail account technically. My regular browser didn't want to recognize my microphone, so that's why my name isn't Noah Healy in this thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, that angle was actually what led me to this research. The marketplace is an artificial intelligence.
I see.
And it is, well, is the marketplace a human being?
No, but
It's
No,
it's
you-
not.
so you
It's an art-
integrate AI into your marketplace and you help it, and it helps you sort out everything.
It's the other way around, actually. So we have an artificially intelligent system called the marketplace that we've been using for centuries. And then we developed computer AIs, and we plugged those computer AIs into the marketplace. But the marketplace superintelligence isn't stable in the presence of non-human intelligences. And so the thing that's been driving our markets, this whole process I've been describing, is that we've been plugging AIs into the market, and that's causing it to break. And so what CDM does is it provides an algorithm for a market superintelligence that is stable to the introduction of new AI technology.
I see. Okay.
And that's the model of the challenge that faces us, as we were talking about during the pre-call. Computers destabilize most, if not all, of our institutions, and we should expect that to be true because people didn't believe computers were possible until it was proved that they could exist. And actually, the proof was a surprise. People didn't think that that's how math worked, but it turns out that it did. So we should expect our institutions to fail, and it's very easy to point to, because they're currently failing, the computational and communicational mechanisms that are causing them to fail and will continue to cause them to fail. And so development of institutional designs that are robust to globalized network communications of artificially intelligent systems is imperative if we don't want to see general collapse of the human condition, which is, always an option.
I see.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm still processing the information.
Yeah. Wait, so you collaborated with a few companies, if I'm not wrong, with your company? Your...
I'm working towards it. Yeah, there's a handful of people. There's a guy who's out of Mexico that's trying to launch a blockchain-inspired system in Singapore. Consulting with a guy who was an Olympic speed skater that's trying to set up another blockchain project that would sort of use some of these approaches. There's a guy in South Africa trying to create an index for coal. There's another guy out of Switzerland that's trying to set up a coffee index in East Africa. I've had a handful of conversations with people from Dubai, India, some places in Central Asia that have evinced some interest but aren't quite over the fence yet, and just searching the world for people that want to have an economy. Sadly, most people are under the impression that they have one of those, which is very bad because nobody does.
True. Wait, so what you do is basically you help people actually bring their product out there, like give certain strategies for them to promote their product.
Yeah. So this is a marketplace mechanism. So if you think of sort of more prosaic products like a car, this would be like an engine, or perhaps just like a cylinder design for an engine.
Oh, I see. So it's a small part of a huge system.
It's a small part of a big system, yes, and the sort of expensive and difficult part of systems is dealing with the customers and governments that the system will work under and be working for, inverse respectively. So those processes are very expensive, far more expensive than I can sort of personally move forward with. So that's why I need partners or licensees or something like that. And so in pursuit of that, I have sort of a dual IP strategy, and the entire system is open source overseas. So if you or your local listeners would like Malaysia to have an economy, then I would strongly encourage you to read the white paper and go look at the code. And if all that makes sense, launch it. And if it doesn't, give me a ring, because I want economies to exist.
Yeah. That's a really amazing thing. Like, because I've never known that such a thing exists until I've actually did a research about you, and now I'm listening it from you. So this is all really new to me, and we've just got out of school, so everything is new to us, All we've thought is just like, okay, you promote stuff, then you get people, and then that's it. Like, there's no process to it, and all of that,
Well, that's one of the things that's very interesting. If you sort of read a lot of history and start noticing patterns, is that the sophistication of our business models has actually regressed a great deal with the introduction of the internet. In like the Bronze Age or the early Iron Age, markets, there would be towns and there'd be a marketplace. There'd be a day where people came together. Merchants would be travelers in many cases, and they would have they would essentially bring things from where they were to where they hoped demand existed. And because of the extreme risks of travel and the extreme risk of who knows whether or not, those ignorant savages over the hill even want this stuff, or they're just going to kill me, the markups were enormous. Now, modern markups aren't that enormous, but there's still, with things like Amazon and other e-commerce solutions, it's just, I will get things from where they are, i.e., this warehouse over here, to your front porch. Like that's the business model, and that's ancient, basically. Like we're reverting back to a form of commerce that was common 2,000 to 3,000 years ago, and within that form of commerce, the advantages accrue to merchants that can supply their own security or be secure. And so the word neo-feudalism gets thrown around sometime. I don't know if you've heard that one before. But that feudalism, in many cases, was around creating the security to allow merchants to exist. And then, the people doing the security would tax the merchants. There was sort of a farming system in that regard. And so that's what's driving some of that. Now, feudalism was also driven by the material realities of warfare in those systems. And we have, guns and missiles and drones and planes and all kinds of wild stuff that is totally incompatible with strong points and whatnot. So I'm not much concerned about neo-feudalism. I'm much more concerned about primitivism sort of driving us socially into a situation where we just can't have nice things anymore, which is much more what's actually happening.
Well, I actually have a question for you. Since you have studied algorithms and stuff, right? Is it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So let's say if a person, because right now we have a lot of people trying to create new content and stuff like that, right? Like content creation, etc., etc. So what advice would you give them? Let's say they want to actually build an audience, and they want as many people as possible to come and watch their content. Like, what should you follow? What are the algorithmic rules that you should apply when you are doing things like that? Let's say it's not following the trend. And
well, the thing is, if I was good at any of that, you wouldn't have just first heard about this system when I personally started talking to you. So I'm afraid I don't really have any secrets to virality or whatnot. The other thing is that producing content is something that current generative AI is decent-ish at and is going to get very better very rapidly. So the viral superstars, as it were, are likely to kind of see themselves outcompeted, and we are in fact. There was stories recently of OnlyFans models complaining about artificial OnlyFans models that can produce pictures of better looking women than actually exist at volumes faster than actual human beings can produce pictures of themselves, and interactions at a greater degree. If you've got a dozen followers, you can have personal relationships with all of them. If you've got 10,000 followers, you can maybe read and respond to every message. If you have 10 million followers, you can't do any of those things anymore. But if you're a computer, you can.
Yeah, true, true.
Uh,
But
so,
then that's the thing, right? Like AI has been both a gift and maybe for some people they might find it as a curse. Like let's say, right? Like it could work
well,
both
so
ways.
yeah, the fourth age, the name of the podcast that I started with
Hmm.
the ex-CTO of Reddit. Uh, my contention is that there's been three sort of critical hinge technologies in the history of humanity, um, or humans, and so that would be the plow, the steam engine, and computers. And the reason I say that these are critical, important changes is because they change the energy and physical relationship with the universe. Um, the plow changes how much energy you can get out of an acre of land in a really dramatic way, and lets you invest energy into the land in a sort of increasing returns sort of a way. The steam engine allows you to extract energy from non-living material and produce work more cheaply than using a human body to do it. And the computer lets you do that same thing but with information, which has a very strong energetic correspondence, physically speaking.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And so computers completely change our relationship to information. I don't know what the status of free speech in your country is. It's a pillar of mine. Um, the concept of free speech comes out of the Enlightenment, and is based on ideas about the nature of reason and humanity that are false. And the way that we know that they're false is that computers exist.
Okay.
Because the people that got the Enlightenment rolling believed that logic was capable of anything, and computers exist because logic actually isn't capable of everything. And that's also why
Oh.
bugs exist.
Hmm.
Um, so these very fundamental and political, philosophical ideas about ideas have been mathematically caged and in some cases broken, and our societies are built on them. Either great men offering wonderful things to the world, or violent tyrants breaking people until they went along. In some cases, both of those were the same person. Uh, we're here now, and our fundamental beliefs are not correct, and so we need to build things that are in line with our best version of reality today. Um, just like an astronomer doing astronomy based on 4,000-year-old conceptions of how the heavens worked would be laughed out of the room. Um, Politicians, bankers, doctors, writers, content creators that build their businesses off of a conception from the 1960s should be laughed out of the room,
Hmm. True.
and that would be all of them.
Yeah, it's true. Because I actually joined a few seminars, right, in terms of integrating AI into businesses, and it showed actually how easy that it is to apply AI into businesses. Like, have you heard of like a diffusion and all of those? Like, you've heard of it,
Yes,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I've actually learned how do you integrate that into your work life, and ChatGPT right now, like every it's on the news, like everywhere you go, everybody says ChatGPT, right? And it does helps a lot, but at the same time, right, you have to be careful when you use it. You don't go and use it to an extent where you don't go think where you stop thinking, you know. And yeah, but then what I feel like when I observe all of this, I feel like AI is really rising right now. In my opinion, yeah, it is.
Yeah. We've hit, I think, a critical point with some of the breakthroughs where these things are getting to the point where we can really ubiquitize them and put them in people's hands, and they're individually impressive enough
Yep.
that they engage basically. But again, you said careful, extraordinary, much more careful than our existing cultures allow us to be. The fundamental problem is something called the alignment problem, where understanding what you want and also getting things to behave in the ways that you want them to do are both hard to impossible problems. And so if we're going to integrate these things successfully, my contention is that we need to be working in alignment. And that's where again, CDM, that's what that's doing. CDM is a realignment, a mechanism of realignment of the interests involved. That means that you can plug in artificially intelligent systems that will, read all the weather maps on Earth and try to figure out what global rice yields will be next year, and stuff like that, in ways that won't then be connected to, and now that I know what global rice yields are next year, let me, just say random numbers or recite the digits of pi while rice farmers are trying to figure out how much to charge and how much, phosphorus to buy. And let me learn which random numbers to recite to them to cause them to buy the wrong amounts of stuff, so that I'll know even more about what's going on, and get even higher rates of return. So that's where having one of these things as sort of a toy, I think, is reasonable. There are some, to me, interesting and obvious challenges that, as they become more and more stylistically sophisticated, we would be able to sort of accomplish. So, for example, I asked one of these AIs for a sequence of limericks, one for each element of the periodic table, that contains the information about who discovered the element and its sort of principal interesting chemical property. It did very, very badly. It didn't really scan very well. If you're familiar with the form, they weren't particularly great. They didn't rhyme properly. The beats weren't really there. But poems and songs are a universal human mechanism for the impartation and retention of information. I think actually it's in your neck of the woods. I can't remember exactly which tribal island it is, but there was a group that was discovered to have an oral tradition of a volcano that's like provably, it was like 7,000-year-old story or something, and I think that's the record holder for the longest certain known human story. There are other stories which look like they're probably older than that, but this is a group that had a story about like where that block of stone came from, and when you go do the geology, that's where that block of stone came from, something like that. Scientific discovery is a very fast process these days. And so there's a large amount of arbitrary but interesting and useful information about the world that we know, but we don't know. Like, you know, um, did you know, for example, that copper and silver are aligned on the periodic table, which is why both are, relatively untarnishable?
Yeah.
Some people know that. Some people don't know that. Do you know what the next thing down on that particular line of the periodic table is?
What?
Gold.
Oh wait. Oh yeah, Arum and Arjun.
Yes. um, so these things exist, and these little interesting stories and diggles of the natural world are important, and conceivably we could embed these things into the sorts of structures that human beings have an easier time learning and thinking about than the kinds of textbooks that we store them in right now. And that's something that generative AI, might be able to do for us. Or maybe it can't. We'll have to find out, basically.
I see. Man. Wow. But
Another one on I think we might be needing to pop out and come back.
Yeah, we should. Hold on, I'll cut out and then I'll send you another link. Yeah, so this is Ryan Watts. He's another co-host from our
Excellent.
podcast. Yeah. So he wasn't able to make
nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. Yeah, sorry, I just got back home. Like, literally, I just came from the mall. My bad.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, good to meet you, Ryan.
Good to meet you too. What is your name, by the way?
Noah Healy.
Noah Healy. All right, nice to meet you.
Do you have video, or?
I do have a video, but my camera is not working because I'm using it on somewhere else. I don't know why it's not working, but
Yeah, I had an issue. I don't know if Eric, you saw, like, I kind of popped and then unpopped, and yeah. So when I came in first, I think the camera was like being held by the previous, so I killed the browser and jumped back, and
Oh.
Yeah.
and now I'm back on.
Okay. So I think I think we could resume the discussion.
Okay.
Yeah. So what you were saying was AI, if it's used very well, then it can be used, but at certain points it can't be, right? Like, you've tested it out. It's been tested out, and it didn't really work well, right?
Well, yeah. The generation of human text and the response to natural language has a few different components. So there's information. What does it actually know? It doesn't know everything. It's not large enough for that. And some of the things that it does know are style, for example. So I did a thing last night, actually, where I asked one to write a story, Sherlock Holmes and Bertie Wooster.
Okay.
If you're familiar with P.G. Wodehouse, and so the notion was that the P.G. Wodehouse's Bertie Wooster stories, Jeeves and Wooster stories, are all told from the point of view of Bertie Wooster, and the Sherlock Holmes stories, of course, are all told from the perspective of Dr. Watson.
Mm-hmm.
So I asked for a story with essentially two parts. The first one told in Bertie's, where he hires Holmes to get him out of a jam so he can get his monogram spats back and doesn't have to give them up to Jeeves. And the second one, where Dr. Watson reveals what's actually going on and that there's a spy ring, involved. And I'd have to say that of the sort of half page that it produced, which went virtually nowhere beyond my prompt, stylistically, it was okay. It didn't have the pop of Woodhouse, and certainly didn't have any new kinds of humorous speech patterns and so on that we'd expect from reading him. Likewise, the Dr. Watson piece was apropos, and it felt similar-ish to the voice of Watson. Again, without any of the detail or life that Conan Doyle can impart. And it didn't flesh the story out. It didn't. There's no interaction between Bertie and Holmes, told from two different perspectives. There's no detail of the story that I didn't produce in my prompt, essentially. But plausible-ish style, producing text that's plausible-ishly styled like P.G. Woodhouse or Arthur Conan Doyle aren't skills that I personally have. It knows what that looks like.
Yeah.
I don't. So if I were to decide to do enough work, I could have Jane Austen write a John le Carré novel. where I attempt to work with it to abstract out of John le Carré novels a long, plausible plot thing, then hand it over and say, write this complicated story, but by Jane Austen. And, it wouldn't be as good as actual Austen writing out a concept given to her by actual, plotted by actual le Carré. And it wouldn't even be as good as sort of, but the styles would be better than that. So there's actual knowledge, there's style, and then there's sort of life and detail and meaning, the other, whatever other intangibles actually exist. What the existing techniques are doing are showing us how much style matters and exists, and encapsulating that in ways that measure it, but not in ways that we can understand the measurements very well. And so we can recreate voices, in some cases quite literally. There's an entire possibility of like wiping out vocal talent, and I've seen several presentations by people that have like deep faked avatars with deep fake voices, where you write a script and something that superficially looks like you and sounds like you says your words.
I heard it in the news. It got a bit problematic, so they have to make an AI which can recognize whether it's a deep fake tech, if deep fake tech was behind it and stuff.
Right. Well, and the thing is, that's how AIs are actually trained. It's an oppositional pattern. So if you build a deep fake detector, what you've done is created an effective deep fake trainer.
Yeah.
So how do you train a deep fake? Hand it a deep fake connector and say, train something that this thing doesn't detect.
I see.
Okay, cool. Now I've got much better deep fakes that don't have those problems.
So basically you have something which helps improve AI, so it's learning between, it's like two friends talking to each other, like trying to improve each other in certain ways.
Well, that's the one that has not happened yet, and I'm trying to plant this seed and sort of get this thing going. I would strongly encourage people to look into Core Disk and sort of building a future, but if you just kind of want to play with the present and watch the world burn, publicly available open source AIs that can operate on amounts of computer hardware that a billion-ish people have access to exist today, and you can download them and run them on your own systems. What happens when those systems talk to each other? You know, like why not grab whatever the current generation of Open Llama or whatnot is and give it a Twitter feed, or some other form, you know. Imagine if there was some sort of technology that allowed global communication between computer devices, and connected up to one or all or any of those things and form communities of machines to chat with each other and train on that. What happens? Are there positive effects? Are there negative effects? Can you get any new things out of the system? Can you have a dozen or 100 or 1 billion AIs bat around an idea to come up with whatever their vote on the best ideas that they can have are, and what do those ideas look like? And you can ask it what you should do in university and see what it says, and create that as a new form of public resource. Have them do investigation, and you know, look into billions of news stories and try to extract, you know, each one of these things gets trained up on whatever local news happens to be, and then chats with themselves until they train up an AI that tells you what it thinks is going on in the world, which might sound crazy and probably is crazy, and it doesn't necessarily comport with what's actually going on in the world.
Do you have an idea of when AI will actually reach to the stage where it can actually be a, how do I say this, a super AI, like a super AI model?
So there are two kinds of things that you might be talking about. So there's super intelligence and there's artificial general intelligence. In many cases, what people are talking about with there is artificial general intelligence, the notion of an AI that has human-ish capacity across the board. The one that is rarely thought about is superintelligence, an AI that has greater than human capacity in at least one respect. I find superintelligence considerably more interesting than general intelligence for two reasons. Number one, it's real and it's here. We've had superintelligence, I would argue, for centuries. And we've actually built our civilizations around these markets that knew more about the economy than any individual did. We've been building high sophistication, advanced civilizations on superintelligence from the inception of high capacity advanced civilizations. So we need superintelligence, and we have superintelligence. General intelligence captures the public imagination. The basic arguments for general intelligence is that the AI models are based off of a biological imitation of brains. And ChatGPT-4 has a parameter size that is similar to the human neocortex. So basically the number of synapses in the thinky part of your brain and the number of synapses-ish in ChatGPT-4 is pretty close to the same number.
Wait, so have they purposely put it upon like the same way the brain works, or that's all they could do? Or do they actually have the capabilities of making it bigger than that?
NVIDIA, that makes the chips that most of this stuff runs on, has recently announced that they are funding a startup that over the course of the next year and a half will build a model that's 10 times larger than ChatGPT, and then a model that is 100 times larger than ChatGPT. ChatGPT was an experiment. So the synaptotron model, or I can't remember exactly what the name for the thing is, but basically the neural net synthetic synapse was proposed before I was even born. I think it goes back to like the early '60s,
Wow.
as a computational mechanism to build certain kinds of algorithms. And there was actually some AI buzz in the late '70s, early '80s that then kind of collapsed because none of the promises were actually accomplished, mainly because the technology was just not even remotely there yet. But there's been a lot of interest for a long time in natural language processing. Being able to interact with your computer like it's Star Trek, being able to say, hey, I would like, the channel to be changed, and then your TV switches channels, that kind of thing. Many different approaches to natural language processing existed, and according to the documents that they wrote at the time, OpenAI decided to build very large neural nets to see what happened with very large neural nets. And what they discovered was there didn't appear to be a ceiling. The presumption was that you'd build some large, what we now call large language model. You'd build a large language model, you'd train it up on some data, it would get as good as it is. You'd get a bigger model, it'd be better, but a little bit better. You get a bigger model, it'd be a little bit better, and there'd be some kind of asymptotic ceiling of how good these things would be. And that's just what would happen. And because training these things is expensive and gets more expensive the bigger it is, they're basically very, very large matrices, matrix operations. Multiplication of matrices is a cubic factor of the size of the matrix. So making a matrix that's 10 times bigger on a side, 100 times as many things requires you to do 1,000 times as much work. And so building out these models bigger and bigger and bigger, they were like, well, if every time we want 100 times a bigger model, we have to do 1,000 times as much work, and 100 times bigger model is like twice as good as the previous one, maybe, then that's a losing proposition. Like these exponential curves are going to diverge, we'll run out of money.
I see.
What they discovered instead is that when you made the model bigger, it got lots more capable. And then a lots more capable again. And then lots more capable again. Is there a ceiling? Maybe. These guys haven't built the quadrillion and 10 quadrillion model system yet. But we don't know. We have to run that experiment to find out what the answer is.
So, what do you think when AI actually reaches that, that threshold, like the highest threshold possible? What do you think? How do you think the world will change? Like, do you have any theory?
Well, so I think Ray Kurzweil has sort of the definitive take on this, the singularity. I don't think that's required. Kurzweil's trigger point for singularity is AIs capable of doing computer design, so that we use the AIs to design the next generation of computer hardware that then advances their capacity to design the next generation of computer hardware, and we get some kind of escape velocity in terms of total computational capacity. That's his model, and that's still currently set for like the late 2030s, I think, to like 2050, somewhere in that range is when that's supposed to happen. That we might be past that already. We'll find out. Some of the generative AIs have started improving algorithmic operations, and there's also some protein folding. The mathematics, so while the number of neurons in ChatGPT and the number of neurons in your brain are similar in size, the neurons in ChatGPT are float parametered function response systems. The neurons in your brain are living cells. Living cells that contain a Turing machine with 300 billion base pairs, which is 600 billion bits of operating data, and that are operating in a chemical environment with bacteria, viruses, all sorts of stuff interacting with them in ways that we don't even remotely understand beyond sort of the words I just said. True experts know a lot more than that, but not for the purposes of this discussion. Like they can't answer any of the critical computational questions. So the computational capacity of the human body is unlikely to be closely approached by the current iterations of this technology. The degree to which the computational capacity of the human body is being used to generate limericks to teach people algebraic geometry may already have been exceeded by these systems. So humans have been trying to get good at games like chess for centuries, games like Go for millennia. Tens, hundreds of millions of dollars have been spent trying to get good at poker. We aren't good at any of these things. Computers are radically better than us at all three of those games, and the gap is widening. We're learning how to get better at those games from watching the computers, and the computers are getting better faster than we are from learning from them. So that's superintelligence is real. We have it. The challenge is, how do we use it? And how do we keep it from being used in ways that harm us? Because in addition to, say, attempting to figure out how to get children's stories to incorporate organic chemistry so that as a part of growing up, you learn fundamentally true things about how the world works that enable you to make proper health decisions and reason about industrial plants and stuff like that. That same technology is currently being used to generate completely fictitious political campaigns and advertising and marketing strategies to try to get you to buy this brand of toothpaste versus that brand of toothpaste, and try to get you into some kind of subordinate financial relationship with a robot that just takes money from you, that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of ways that this can go wrong, and it's going wrong in some of those ways publicly right now. And there's a lot that we could do with this capacity if we can figure out how to deal with that. But that's the challenge, and I don't have a general solution to how to fix all of those problems. I have a specific solution for how to have an economy, but I can have that discussion. And so another highly pertinent one, I just saw there was a study, I think a few months old, of cancer doctors. And they discovered that in 80% of cases that get to specialists, the specialists found serious errors in the diagnostics prior to getting to them.
That's
So
pretty serious, isn't it? Like,
yes,
if your diagnostics gets wrong and they read it wrongly, then something wrong could happen. Like, let's say they want to perform.
yeah. Mom goes to the doctor. She's got a pain in her side. He says that's appendicitis. They take out the appendix. It turns out it was liver cancer. They would have been able to find it and catch it and fix it, but they got off on the appendix thing, and now they can't find and catch it and fix it anymore, and she's dead.
Oh my.
That's the kind of thing we're talking about. Yes.
Okay, that's serious. That's really serious.
Right? 80%. We know for a fact that we can make devices that can read X-rays better than human beings can read X-rays, because that experiment has been done multiple times. It's fully replicable. It basically always happens. We also cannot use the outputs of those experiments to do our radiology detection for us, because the way in which those experiments are conducted is incompatible with the production of actual medical devices that could be used to improve that 80% we were just talking about. So the decision not to solve this problem is killing people.
Yeah. I mean, this is the first time I've heard of it. This is the first time I've heard, like, 80% of specialists, they read it wrongly and then they perform the wrong procedures. Like, it's really shocking.
There can be some less severe versions of this as well. Like the family doctor thinks you have pancreatic cancer. Maybe it turns out you have stomach cancer. Things like that. But you go to the medical system. You say, "Hey, doc, what's wrong?" And that person isn't a specialized expert in exactly what's wrong with you, and they get it wrong. Okay, people are human. That's totally understandable. But we don't have to rely on the person that's sitting in front of you. Why isn't that person plugged into a global knowledge base that can make medical decisions as best as human beings are capable of making medical decisions?
Yeah.
Well, because we didn't build that, because we don't want to, or we hadn't thought of it, or whatever reason. But we could.
But I do have a question. Like, let's say AI actually, like, people actually integrate AI into such machines, right? Do they ever come to a point where it gets faulty? Like, let's say the system's down, or let's say there's an error in between the code or something like that.
Well, that's the fundamental challenge in building those systems. We need to build these systems in ways that we can understand what it is that they're doing and advance their capacities. Because if I took this hypothetical person with stomach cancer that looks like pancreatic cancer and took them to a doctor from 300 years ago, they wouldn't get the right diagnosis because they don't know what those things are.
Yeah.
So we as humanity have the capacity to increase our own abilities, and we've developed professional societies and certifications and government regulatory oversights and so on to deal with the human ability to learn, the human ability to add to human knowledge, and the human ability to make decisions. But we have machines that can do at least two of those things better than any human beings have ever been able to do them, and might be able to do all three. And we also will continue to have those capacities. So just because sort of computer chess engines are way better than us doesn't mean that human beings never win games against computer chess engines.
Yeah, it's true. Recently, I've seen a few videos where there's a title for those who are elite at chess. They're called grandmasters, and they've actually succeeded in defeating the top tier bots, like AI bots.
Right.
Right.
They can't do it consistently.
Yeah, but they can't do it consistently. But they got a chance to.
But yeah, they're good enough that they can hang with the machine, and if they get into a system that's weird enough where basically they get lucky and the machine gets unlucky, they can find themselves in positions where they'll have a winning combination and find it and win. And so we need to re-understand what we're doing in terms of the information and its content and form in ways that let us use this extraordinary computing capacity to save our own lives.
Yeah.
And the people that do that will be able to build systems and civilizations that have a future. And if we just don't do it, then we won't have any of those.
I see. A funny story actually. A few months back, right? I actually started this so-called advertising agency, just as a side hustle thing. So I've been handling like Instagram accounts, like trying to get them followers and stuff. But recently, right, there's been a problem. I'm not sure, is it because of consistency or what? But certain people, right, even though they are consistent, even though they are like, how to say, they're trying every single tactic out there, but then it's still not getting that that wanted attraction. I'm not sure if it's because of the algorithm or is it because of they're not reaching to the point where people are actually interested in watching their views. Yeah, sometimes.
Well, that's the challenge. Like the people that have created social media sites essentially haven't solved that problem, and so they have to maintain secret algorithms to operate their sites for them.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that's their only option. Because they haven't solved the sociability problem, and so being a high level Instagram influencer or being on the front page of Google or having a bunch of friends on Facebook or whatever, that's worth a lot of money.
Yeah.
And that means that if you can find a way to achieve those things, the mechanism that does that for you is the thing that you need to do. And since the gatekeeper of that is the algorithm, if the algorithm was public, everybody would simply do what the algorithm rewards.
Yeah, but the problem is if everybody follows the same algorithm, right, it will still be the same thing, right? Everybody's still at the same
which
level.
Which means that they have built systems that are foundationally suicidal.
Yeah.
That they need to be secret because if they're public, they don't get anything, and they haven't figured out what the actual value of being able to share 280 character messages with the world, or pictures of yourself, or what your family ate for breakfast, or whatever is. There isn't one there. So what they're actually extracting is the value proposition of gathering information about hundreds of millions to billions of people and balling that up and selling that information to people that are willing to pay money to buy it.
Yeah.
And I've been in the room with people getting millions of dollars together to buy large human databases for commercialization.
Wow.
I've seen that happen. And I had a few conversations with those guys about what they might be able to do to further monetize their operations, and then I never heard from them again. So I don't know what they're doing with it, but that's real. Everyone knows that's real. I've actually seen some of it happen. I mean, that's extraordinarily creepy and evil.
Yeah, it's actually crazy how much people want to spend money, like spend so much money for something which is really rare. And like, if they really want something, that need is there, they actually pay loads and loads of money for it. It's really, how to say, it's really interesting to see that happen. It's really funny to see that. But yeah, but I mean, you can't. That's how businesses take advantage of that, right? They use that need to actually set their price value for people to actually buy their products.
Yeah. Well, as the markets destabilize and become more and more expensive, businesses are moving as much as possible to avoid using them, which further destabilizes them and makes them more expensive. And so the economy will, at some point, reach breaking. And we've seen that happen. Numerous countries over the last few decades have had total political and social collapse and restructuring under entirely new management, because that's what happens when you don't have a functioning economy.
Yeah. Wait, so you started CDM, right? A long time back. So how did you actually start your company? What was your journey throughout the entire process?
Well, so the discovery of CDM was essentially a hobby activity. I had a job that had no professional advancement. I had money in the bank. I decided to essentially take a sabbatical and work on my actual interest, which was computational mathematics. I was thinking about communication algorithms and how you could communicate consensus in a networked environment. Consensus, again, as I was saying earlier, it's sort of easy to get consensus if you can bring everything together in one place, because everybody can just jabber until they're all saying the same thing. But if you're networked, if you're disconnected, consensus is considerably more difficult. Again, because lying about where the consensus point is could be advantageous if the liar can manipulate certain things. So that's where the notion of incentive for consensus came from. And I was thinking in terms of having an interest in consensus data, and so being willing to pay for it. And so this notion of building a system where alignment was imposable because you could essentially pay for aligned behavior. So like, I want this kind of knowledge to be generally available, and this is how much I'm willing to pay for that. That functionally does something that you could call pricing transaction costs, which isn't generally believed to be possible. And so I was kind of excited, and I went over to my buddy's house and told him about it. And he asked me a question that got me thinking about markets. And as I was walking home, I had an intuition that there might be a way to turn this into a marketplace. And it seemed like a hard problem. And so I decided to start thinking about it. And I kind of worked out that intuition. Then I wrote some code to actually check, capacity and so on. And that's when I found out that this system was considerably more efficient than the markets that we actually have. And so then that's a big deal. The adoption of a much more efficient algorithm creates an enormous amount of economic opportunity. And so I decided that I should get that economic opportunity into general circulation. I reached out to an old college professor, some other local folks, started trying to get the ball rolling, figuring out what was going on. There's local volunteer organizations that will sort of mentor you into it, and so learned about business plans and pitch decks and put some very crude ones of those things together. started investigating IP and moving forward on the patent, and just did a huge amount of historical research and reading to figure out whether or not this is something that was already known, and also what language to use with the people that I was going to need to describe this to. The easiest way to understand this is in integer equations, or integral equations. So if you're familiar with differential equations from calculus, this is just the flip side of those, using integrations instead of differentiations. Unfortunately, most people don't speak that language, so there was a lot of learning for me to learn how to speak to other things.
Yeah, I've only done basic integration.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, think again what I was talking about before. Like an AI created credible-ish style of P.G. Wodehouse and Arthur Conan Doyle describing similar-ish events. We have, in engineering parlance, these mathematical formalisms that allow us to very accurately model real systems. And we have Dickens, Twain, these writers that produce things that live and connect and get inside people's heads and move forward.
Yeah.
What if this Shakespearean capacity to connect to humanity could be applied to these computationally pure descriptions of reality, to be able to produce user manuals, training documents? I mean, these are things that are potentially available. They can't do it right now. That's not something they can do. We can't do it either. But again, we can't play chess at 3,500 elo, and they can. So maybe they can figure that out. Like that's to me, that's a seeable, achievable goal. So that's sort of the path. I've tried a bunch of things that haven't really borne much fruit, and I decided to start using LinkedIn as a networking mechanism. So I've expanded my LinkedIn reach by about 7,400 people since then, and had hundreds of conversations, getting better and better at having conversations. And that's with like the COVID lockdowns, I got into getting guest spots on podcasts, and I'm just kind of throwing spaghetti at the wall and hopefully getting something out of it. Like I said, I've run across a handful of people that are attempting to get markets going, and I just got to keep turning that crank until these markets are going.
Wait, okay, so a long time ago, a friend of mine, two friends of mine, they are really into coding, and we were discussing this thing, whether AI can actually develop feelings, since AI has a brain of its own. Can AI actually develop feelings like humans do? Is it possible?
So that's a complicated question. Again, existing AI, the basic argument is that for the pro side, is that consciousness is some kind of threshold computational phenomenon. That computation at some level of complexity is high enough that it has these properties. The counter side is that these things are spiritual in nature, and God personally, hands out souls. I don't have. I'm a computational mathematician. Like I don't have insights on that divide of which side's closer to right.
Mm-hmm.
I can point out that the computational threshold argument, existing AI systems don't have much to go in that computational threshold.
Yeah.
There's a big long stretch between the computational capacities of even single cells and the genetic material within them,
Mm-hmm.
and existing computer mega clusters.
I see.
So there are slime molds that efficiently solve NP routing problems. So ants can demonstrate high efficiency optimization algorithms from simple behaviors. There's all sorts of ways for small unitary collective computational objects to reach very high bars. Now, if some kind of Leela-like project gets general acclaim and a billion-ish people all grab an open model of development and doing that development with all of their machines, talking to all of their machines, that large-scale internet system could have conscious properties from that, once it's complicated enough, then it's conscious type of argument. And you could very consciously attempt to build that in, because if you had a community like that, part of what some of the training could be doing is training on awareness of training.
Yeah.
And imputing that into the system and creating those sorts of conscious, sequences. But that's about as far as I can get with my expertise.
I see. There was also another theory. A friend of mine said that is it possible that AI could actually turn into, you've seen the movie Terminators, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So is it possible that it actually reaches to that point, like it can actually be like that?
Well, the much scarier version of that, from my perspective, is that AI does not require intention or general intelligence or self-directed invulnerable robot assassin powers to destroy us.
Mm-hmm.
We are destroyed. That already happened. Our professional systems, our economic systems, our political systems are all destabilizing because computers can generate noise that is plausibly signal at rates greater than our, pathetic tiny ape brains can deal with. And our existing systems are aware that liars and con men are dangerous and have cultural and legal actions to help defend us from liars and con men that are entirely insufficient to the capacities of global communication. And so I don't find the Terminator future plausible, but general social self-destruction I would say is inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
The only question that's available for us is whether, with still some pretty decent chunks of things in the ashes, we do the Phoenix thing and we build next level civilizations
Mm-hmm.
with more robust institutions operating on principles that are mathematically sound at the very least and are robust to computers shouting numbers in our ears. Or if we don't do that and we have a dark age.
Yeah. Man, but
And that, sorry, yeah.
No. So go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. My concern is that having a dark age is the current plan. This is not a living debate in professional societies, in political discourse, in financial circles, and so the belief that we can continue what we're doing is insane. And if we all choose to be insane, we'll get the kinds of systems that insane people have, i.e. no systems at all.
Yeah. But seriously, all of this is really informative, It's like right now talking to you, I learned a lot of things. I really got to thank you for that because I'm actually planning to pursue computer science after this. Yeah, I'm actually doing my A levels. I'm starting next week. Yeah, I'm studying A
Awesome.
levels. Yeah, I'm taking computer science, mathematics, and physics. And yeah, I'm actually planning to pursue computer science for my degree. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, if you ever have questions or want to chat again, reach out
Yeah.
because I'd say it's one of the most important fields of study that we have available to us these days.
Yeah. So can I have your Instagram? Like, do you have any source of contact?
I am not on Instagram.
I
The
see.
only social media I'm on is LinkedIn. Although I now have a podcast, I'll send you through Matchmaker like all my links and
Yeah,
stuff.
Okay. Yeah. So thank you so much for being here today. Like, you've really taught us a lot of things, and I'm sure the listeners and the viewers here would really learn a lot from you. Let's say if they have any questions, I'll just send them to you, and you can give an answer for that, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Happy to do it.
Yeah. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So we'll see you next time.
Yep.
Yeah. So we're signing off. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.